It's been barely a week since the Taliban seized control of Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan. Their return to power was swift and organized. We asked our David Martin to help us make sense of just what happened and what it might mean for the future.
There was nothing that I or anyone else saw that indicated a collapse of this army and this government in 11 days.
The collapse no one saw coming began on Friday, August 6th, with the fall of a provincial capital in the far west of Afghanistan. The White House said it was time for the Afghans to step up.
Now is the moment for the leadership and the will in the face of the Taliban's aggression and violence.
In the next 2 days, 4 more provincial capitals fell, including the key city of Kunduz, which surrendered without a fight. That night, General Frank McKenzie, the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, alerted the Pentagon. Kabul could be surrounded within 30 days. An alarming prediction that turned out to be way off. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby.
Clearly, the security situation is deteriorating, and just over the last, 72 hours, roughly 5 provincial capitals fell to the Taliban. That's deeply concerning.
And they kept falling as one after another Afghan units trained and equipped by the U.S. gave up without a fight. By August 12th, Ghazni, just south of Kabul, was in Taliban hands. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley warned that the Taliban was within 24 hours of Kabul, and the Pentagon ordered in combat troops to reinforce the airport and safeguard the evacuation of Americans from the embassy.
The first movement will consist of 3 infantry battalions. They will move to Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Taliban leaders assured U.S. officials they only intended to surround the capital, not take it.
Kabul is not right now in an imminent threat environment. But clearly, David, if you just look at what the Taliban's been doing, you can see that they are trying to isolate Kabul.
Last Saturday, General McKenzie, the Central Command chief, flew to the Persian Gulf to meet face-to-face with Taliban leaders. He took a map showing a 25-kilometer area around the airport, intending to warn the Taliban to stay out or their fighters would be attacked. But by the time they met on Sunday, Taliban fighters were already rolling into the city, and all McKenzie could do was tell them not to interfere with the evacuation. Afghan President Ghani fled the country, and the Taliban were taking selfies in the presidential palace. The collapse of the House of Cards, erected over 20 years, was complete.
It was a very hollow government and a hollow military.
Since 2012, John Sopko has been the watchdog for reconstruction as the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan, issuing report after report calling out failed projects and rampant corruption. Just this past week, he issued a lessons learned report.
I did not think it would collapse this quickly, although once it happened, we realized that all the preconditions for failure were there.
The report is based on his own inspections in Afghanistan and on more than 700 strikingly candid interviews with senior administration officials down to aid workers in the field. None more candid than Douglas Lute, an Army general who served as a special advisor on Afghanistan to Presidents Bush and Obama. We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan, Lute told the Inspector General. We didn't have the foggiest notion of what we were undertaking. It's really much worse than you think. Or this recorded interview with Ryan Crocker, former ambassador to Afghanistan, talking about the Afghan police.
They are useless as a security force, and they're useless as a security force because they are corrupt down to the patrolman level.
This endemic corruption is also one of the key reasons of the success of the Taliban. When we poured money like manna from heaven in Afghanistan, what would you expect? They grabbed it. We contributed to the corruption by just pouring too much money.
$145 billion went into rebuilding Afghanistan, producing, according to President Biden, an Afghan army and police that should have been capable of holding its own against the Taliban.
We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong, incredibly well equipped.
Was that a real 300,000?
That's what the Afghans reported, but we knew that there were serious problems with what we call ghosts. That means people on the rolls but who don't exist, but whose salary and everything else is just stolen by the Afghan officers and generals.
And it was more than salaries. It was all the supplies for those ghost soldiers and policemen.
A U.S. general told us 50%, 50, of the fuel we provided to the Afghans was stolen. 50%. We were talking about billions of U.S. dollars.
But sheer waste doesn't explain why Afghan armed forces couldn't or wouldn't fight once the U.S. withdrew. Why couldn't the Afghan army become less dependent on the United States?
We didn't let them become less dependent. The Afghans couldn't deliver the food or buy the fuel. We did it for them. So we essentially made them dependent. We gave them equipment that they didn't know how to maintain and couldn't sustain. They just couldn't function without us.
But the military officers who were advising and assisting the Afghan army must have seen all this in detail. Were they warning that as soon as we pull our support, they're going to collapse?
It was the U.S. Air Force that first alerted us and alerted the Pentagon that without U.S. or coalition contractor support, the Afghan Air Force would collapse within a matter of months.
The American way of war simply did not work for the Afghan military. While child mortality rates went down over the last 20 years, sick babies must now be lifted over barricades to get care. The scenes of chaos at Kabul airport promise to be the most indelible of the lessons learned from the American failure in Afghanistan. So the debate's going to take place. Who lost Afghanistan?
The United States lost Afghanistan. There was a lot of mistakes to go around for everybody. And I think, in my humble opinion, a healthier question is, what do we learn from those 20 years so we don't repeat it again?